Witchers, welcome back to the Witcher Lorecast. This is your host, Tom, or Robots. I'm here with Toasty with his dead flowers in the background because he hates life. How's it going, Toasty?
Damn, that's actually true.
Oh, no.
Oh, so like, that's dark. The most accurate intro you've ever made for me. Holy shit.
Oh, no. So, hey, welcome back to the show, everybody. Today, we are discussing a variety of other locations. We've been going through some of the kingdoms and stuff, but today we are going to be talking about some of the lesser locations, some of the lesser known, the ones that there isn't as much
fleshed out.
Yeah, there isn't as much detail about them because there's not as much happening in the books or the games in those places. So, Toasty, which places are we going to today? We're taking a little tour.
Yeah, so we're looking at Sodden, Brugge, Verden, Kerack, and Cidaris.
Cidaris is a cool name.
Yeah,
I think that one's cool. I mean, they're all kind of cool in their own ways, but Cidaris, Where are you from? Cidaris. Okay, that sounds fancy or something. I don't know. So, all right. So, which one are we going to first?
So we're looking at Sodden first, from the most familiar for. Because a lot of the listeners.
Big old battle happened there.
Yes, a very large battle. So kind of how we do with our usual things. We're going to get a little bit of rundown of some of the statistics. So it is a hereditary monarchy, much like a lot of the stuff we see. It is a most recently in like the lore, a vassal state of Temeria, but it was a former kingdom of its own. It is ruled by the Temerian dynasty, but formerly Eckhard of Sodden was the ruler. They officially speak common speech, and I'll just say out of the way, that is the official language for all of the places we will be talking about today. And then
that side of the lore is pretty simplistic compared to certain other fantasy
language. Yeah, you feel like you see a lot of like expanded languages in most fantasy settings, but here it's like, like
if they're human, they speak common. It's just kind of
common, Elvish. I'm trying to think. Dwarf.
Yeah, the dwarves have their own.
It was like language. They have their own language, right? And then like they have like the magic language, which I can't remember what they call that, or if they just even call it anything. It's just kind of they talk. So
yeah.
So that's about it. And its official currency is the Temerian Orin, of course.
Makes sense.
So Sodden was a former kingdom located around the Yaruga River between Cintra, Brugge, and Riverdale. After the Battle of Sodden Hill, Sodden was split into Upper Sodden and Lower Sodden, with the Yaruga forming a natural border. With the Peace of Cintra, the two halves were recombined into Sodden, and it became a vassal state of Temeria.
So that time period when it was separated was basically that was just the battle lines. That's where the Nilfgaardians made it as that far north, which was like
they made it partway through Sodden, where they were pushed back at the Battle of Sodden Hill, and then they kind of took the part before the Yaruga, and the Yaruga for a good chunk of the war created like that natural like line between the northern kingdoms and Nilfgaard.
Right, because it's very hard for an army to cross a river. When you're crossing any water, it puts the army that's crossing that barrier is very exposed. You can't maneuver around, and so that becomes just a natural boundary.
Yeah. Which I thought was a very interesting fact. The coat of arms of Sodden was apparently created by a Witcher wiki user, Imboro, but it was apparently featured in The Witcher 3 and like a little clip or snippet of like series family tree or something. Showed a picture and it was there, and became a canonical emblem rather than just like a fan-made thing. It appears to be a red jewel set in a gold pendant on a background of like lighter blue.
That sounds, it sounds like it matches. That's similar to some of the other emblems. Yeah.
And the Imboro Rid is like a heraldic expert. So like they kind of study this kind of stuff. So it makes sense. Heraldic and Witcher expert. So, After the death of Eckhard of Sodden, the throne passed to his closest living relative, his half-nephew, Foltest.
Oh, good. Foltest,
Yep.
our favorite guy.
Yep. In 1263, the Nilfgaardian Empire launched a full-scale invasion of the north, and after slaughtering the kingdom of Cintra, moved its army to Sodden. The first battle of Sodden resulted in the northern army being swiftly defeated, and the Nilfgaardians conquering the region later known as Upper Sodden, before crossing the Yaruga and attacking the northernmost regions of Sodden, where they were defeated in the Battle of Sodden Hill. This defeat caused the Nilfgaardian army to retreat back across the Yaruga, and no further battle ensued as the other bank was too well defended by northern armies.
Right. So. And this is a lot of what we see in actually the Witcher TV show even. So we see bits and pieces of this, and then the aftermath of the battle in the second season. So so this one's pretty familiar. I feel like a lot of people are going to feel like, okay, they're familiar with that, but other than that, we just don't know that much about Sodden, because it's not a centerpiece of a lot of what's going on. It's kind of a minor location, and it just happened to have a battle on it because of the proximity to Cintra. Yeah,
it's a real like small. I mean, like even like listed, and I'm sure I could find it, but like just generally like didn't really list a capital. And like if you think about it, there's not really any like major like cities or like hubs there or whatever. It's mostly just like kind of open country, and you see like kind of like peasants and like commoners just kind of living there. But like it's not like, you know, not a whole lot of like metropolizing going on in the area.
Right. Not a large population, mostly just farms and fields and things. Yeah. All right. So where do we go next?
Next, we go into Brugge.
Brugge.
Brugge. Named after a Belgian city, I think. I think there's also a city in Belgium named Brugge.
Brugge. So anybody from that part of the world that knows if that's the same spelling. Okay, that's interesting, because usually the names are pretty distinct from real world locations.
Yeah. It is a monarchy. It is also a vassal state of Temeria, former kingdom and vassal state of Cintra, ruled by King Vinslav. The capital is Brugge, as a common theme. And then their currencies are the crown and the copper.
Okay, that sounds cool. Crown and copper. Yeah.
So Brugge was a small kingdom, now vassal state, on the old road. It is separated from its neighbors by the river Yaruga, its tributary Ribbon, and the river Trava. Brugge is surrounded by Sodden to the east, Cintra to the south, Verden to the west, and Brokilon to the north. So
it's kind of like this like locations that's just squished between all these other bigger or neighbor locations. In some cases, just similar size, but yeah.
Yeah, they're pretty similar. Sodden's definitely bigger, but like, well, actually all of them. Verden's about the same size, and Brokilon's about the same size, but the other two are much larger, obviously. Brugge was originally an independent kingdom before Cintra took over, making it a vassal state. After Queen Calanthe's death, Brugge became a vassal state to Temeria and was then ruled over by King Vinslav, who was a vassal to the Temerian king.
This stuff, I mean, so much of this stuff echoes the things that happened in European history with all of these little kingdoms. Like if you watch the history of Europe over the last 2,000 years, especially after the fall of Rome, and these little kingdoms that pop up, and the way that like one grows and they take more land, and then they have claims. We talked about this in previous episodes, having claims to somebody else's land through like marriage or whatever, hereditary something. And the way that they just kind of, it's almost like watching a bunch of like amoebas like eat each other and then get bigger and then divide and then get smaller again, you know, like, yeah, it's kind of what goes on with this stuff. But
yeah, and a lot of this stuff like ends up getting like, I mean, we see it the last two, it's like, you know, they get taken by Cintra, and then like after that they get taken by Temeria because they're just getting absorbed by bigger kingdoms to like, you know, watch over them. But like Sodden is just kind of like, they see the point there with like Sod with it not being as like, I think like important, you know, population, or just like, because, you know, it just became a vassal state and Foltest ruled over it. Right. But like here, he actually like set out like a vassal king to rule over it in his stead. So it's like definitely got a bit, I think, probably significantly higher like population to it.
It's more important. Has to have somebody there to rule over it. Yeah, and just because somebody's a vassal doesn't mean that they're 100% ruled over by somebody else. It's a term of agreement that means like, we're going to do what you say and we're going to pay you a certain tithe or some sort of tax. But at the same time, they are kind of on their own in the way that they rule their own people outside of certain context. We won't go into all the details, but it's not like they are just completely subsumed by a bigger place. It's an agreement to be ruled by them in a way. Yeah.
There is, as far as I could find, no official coat of arms. So yes, not that important. And a lot of these are kind of like a bit iffy on the coat of arms. But I'll talk about each of those as we look over them. And during the Second Northern War, Brugge was one of the kingdoms which suffered the most in the Nilfgaardian invasion. Especially considering its like location to Cintra. I mean, once they took Cintra, just kind of go straight up because it's north. So it definitely was one of the first targets there after. In 1263, during the First Northern War, many refugees left displaced from the slaughter of Cintra traveled to Brugge for shelter. The war led to a large surplus of cheap Nilfgaardian wares traveling from Brugge into Temeria, where the competing cheap prices started to greatly damage the economy. King Wiltist of Temeria knew he couldn't shut the borders between his kingdom and Brugge, as it would seriously anger the Merchants Guild and affect trade relations between them, though the impact of this great takeover led to Nilfgaard's florin outing the local currency in certain areas of Brugge.
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit during the Temeria episode and how, and again, this is another one of those things that's very, it's based on things that happened during actual wartime. And it would make sense. The people who are fleeing Cintra don't have anywhere else to go. They can't go into the sea unless they have a boat to get away on. They can't go south. It's not easy to go to the west necessarily. So they go north. They want to escape the Nilfgaardians.
Yep. So, during the interwar period of late 1263 to early 1267, several northern rulers agreed to outlaw and hunt the Scoia'tael from their lands due to recent violent attacks from the non-humans. Part of this time period included a pogrom in the capital in which many non-humans are killed, including the grandmother of Yarpen Zigrin.
Oh no! Yarpen's Nana.
Yep.
Is she called Nana? I hope she's called Nana.
I feel like it's like a one syllable thing, it just seems like they kind of vibe. Like Nan.
Yeah.
I feel like he'd walk and be like,
Nan.
Yeah. I don't know. That seems fitting.
It tracks.
In several instances, Bruggian troops attacked dryads mistaken for escaping elves or those fighting alongside them, even sometimes venturing into Brokilon to hunt them. This angered Queen Aithne, who began an order to kill any humans found past Brokilon's borders.
Par for the course.
We'll, of course,
not being nice to elves thing.
Yeah, and we'll, of course, expand more on the dryads and stuff when we get to Brokilon.
Okay, so that's Brugge, and we're now moving on to Verden. So what's the deal with Verden?
So they are also a monarchy. They are an independent kingdom, a former tributary state of Cintra until 1263, and vassal state of Nilfgaard from 1267 to 1268. So they were ruled by Cintra, then taken over by Nilfgaard for a bit, and now are their own independent land. Ruled by Kistrin, smelly old Kistrin. For those that remember that. Yeah, that was the thing when Geralt finds Ciri in Brokilon Forest. She's running away from Kistrin because he smells funny.
Nice.
She doesn't like him.
Nice.
Formerly Urville, the previous ruler, his capital is Nastrog. Holy cow. You mean to tell me that there's a capital that's not named after the same as the country?
Yeah, right.
Or our kingdom. And its official currency is the ducat.
The ducat. I have a map here. I figured it would be useful to open this up so you guys can see where Sodden is next to Cintra, and then Brugge is kind of stuck between all these other locations. And Verden, over on the western side, is right up against the ocean. And then if you go south, you've got Cintra, but there's kind of that inlet that crosses where the river comes out and hits the ocean. That's in the way. And then there's Kerack to the north. But otherwise, Broccolon Forest, it's just kind of squeezed between Broccolon Forest and the coast. Yep. So it's another one of those locations that just like, if the Nilfgaardians are coming up through that location, you don't really have anywhere else to go, but just keep going north to get away from them.
Pretty much. Verden is located at the very mouth of the river Yaruga, with Kerack and Broccolon on its northern borders and Cintra in the south, just on the other side of the river. Its coat of arms and flag depicted this is the actual term, I'm not sure. I think this is like a checkered kind of pattern, I believe, based on just like the picture, but a chequy of gold and black. A check.
Chequois? Maybe it's
Chequois?
It looks French. Chequi. Like quoi would be what in French?
I tried
so
to
maybe
Google
it means
that.
a check what?
Much.
It's a check what pattern?
I don't know, but I based on the picture, which I don't believe it was an official picture. It was just like a design based off of the description, but it looked like a checkered pattern. But a chequois of gold and black. In earlier times, it was sometimes depicted as black and silver. The kingdom is also symbolized by two bull horns of black and gold.
Cool. All right.
In 1263, it was a vassal state of Cintra, but surrendered to the Nilfgaardian Empire at the beginning of the Second Northern War. Later, it would gain its independence and become a small kingdom. And this actually gets a little bit more like future than we usually get, because some of these stuff they do expand on like what state they're in way past. But centuries later, in the age of colonization and piracy, Verden established a few forts on the eastern coasts. So way past all these events.
Yeah.
After the First Northern War in 1263, Verden received many refugees from nearby Cintra, left displaced after the massacre in the capital. We see, of course, Cintra, they're just spread out in every direction, essentially.
Right.
Following the war, Verden faced a similar problem as Brugge when they received a great influx of cheap Nilfgaardian goods. Foltest similarly kept the borders open for the sake of the Merchants Guild, leading to the ducat being outed by the Nilfgaardian Florin.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
they basically suffered the same fate.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, that's those locations. We still have some others to get to, but before we do that, we're going to go thank our patrons and remind you guys about the Patreon episode coming up. So let's go do that.
Very well. Let us get this over with. Something has infested my vineyard.
Great. Let me go prepare my something oil then.
All right, here we are in the middle of the show. This is where we get to thank our patrons, including our newest patron, Annalisa J. Welcome to the Patreon. And you signed up as a tier 4, which means you can join us next week on Monday, the 27th at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, in order to chat with us during our patron episode. And Toasty, we're doing a really fun episode this coming week. It's the Monster Dating Game.
Monster dating show game.
Which is just par for the course at this point with how many of our episodes end up going. If you'd like to join us, you're welcome to join us. You just have to sign up on patreon.com/Witcher Lorecast as a tier 4 or higher. And then you can join us next week. And then if you stick around, you can join us for future months after that. And this is what we do every month. So thank you. Thank you to our patrons. We also have to call out our higher vampires, Ben of Temeria and Jared M. Thank you so much for you guys for signing up. And all 15 of you, thank you for your support. Also, if you'd like to help us out, you can leave a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, and a 5-star rating will get read out on a future episode of the show. We don't have any new ones this week, but we'd love to read out your words and get your words on the show. And you can also drop us a rating on Spotify or whatever other platform you listen to this on, or share us with your friends. Any of that stuff helps. And yes, Pasta Monster 1 in chat, Monster Dating Game. Yep. We're doing a monster dating game show.
Yes. That's exactly what was said. That seemed to be the consensus at the end of the last patron chat. So here we are. We're going to be doing this. It's going to be interesting. But you know what? It's February. It makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. It fits.
It fits.
Say it faster. What?
I don't know. I don't know. But but thank you to everybody who helps support the show. All right, let's move on with the rest of the show.
You smell of death and destiny, heroics and heartbreak.
It's onion.
Right, yeah.
All right, we're back. And it's time to talk about Kerack.
Mm-hmm.
Kerack. This is like a tiny little guy. This is the smallest one.
Smallest one, but somehow more extensive lore than the rest. Which, I guess makes sense. But it is it's a bit different. It is a patrimonial monarchy. Which I believe when I looked that up was that there's much more absolute power in like the monarch.
Yeah, patrimonialism is a form of governance in which all power flows directly from the ruler. There's no distinction between the public and private domains. So the monarchy owns everything.
Yeah, so I guess like a dictatorship, but in the form of a monarchy. So interesting. It is a former kingdom. It has had its lands annexed by Cidaris, which we'll get to why in a moment. Ruled by the Kerack dynasty, up until now, had a defined military, the Kerackian army. Its capital, of course, Kerack. Surprise there. But its official currency was the Novigradian crown.
Which is odd because it is more north than some of these other locations. Mm-hmm. Like if you travel south from Kerack, it's on the coast up north of Verden. But if you travel south to Nilfgaard, you have to go through Verden and Cintra to get to Nilfgaard. So that's interesting that they were using Nilfgaardian currency.
Novigradian.
Oh, Novigradian. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I was thinking Nilfgaard. Novigradian. Yeah. Okay. So there's still
right. Temeria entirely between them and like Redania where Novigrad would be. So it is a little interesting that it's like,
there's some
use that
there.
official. Yeah. I would expect like maybe like the Orin or something just to make it easier or so, but who knows? Kerack was stretched along the Adalat River from the Great Sea in the west to the Caucasian foothills in the east. It was bordered by Cidaris in the north, Temeria in the northeast, Brugge in the east, and Verden in the south. Sandwiched between a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah,
as you can see on this map.
Yeah. So, yep.
In the emblem
make it
of
even
Kerack,
bigger so everybody can see just how much sandwiching happened. There you go. Look at that.
The emblem of Kerack is a blue swimming dolphin with red details placed on gold. This is official flag and coat of arms.
So their coat of arms is basically dolphin art?
Yeah.
Yeah. Dolphin art was a big joke growing up in Florida near the coast because there's a lot of these like places people come for, like tourists go to the beaches, and then there's little shops, and every little shop had like airbrushed shirts and dolphin art all over the place. And so that became just like the de facto joke about like the crappiest form of art is dolphin art.
Yeah. It's kind of funny how like popularized like dolphin stuff is considering how awful they are as animals. We're not going to go into the details of that one, but
Florida lore. Maybe Rob, we should do a Florida Lorecast.
The area was originally inhabited by the elves, who built a light tower at the mouth of the Adalat. After they abandoned this region, humans started to settle. They founded the port city of Kerack near the abandoned lighthouse, and soon it became a den of pirates, free traders, and similar free-minded people. At the beginning of the 13th century, the city and its vicinities became a base of operations for the merchant and pirate Osmic. After monopolizing the sea trade in the area, finishing off the competition, and winning a few petty wars with Verden and Cidaris, he crowned himself as the first king of Kerack. The coronation was seen as just formalizing the status quo, since Osmic basically controlled the whole region before the ceremony.
So this explains the governmental system. He was a pirate. He was like a crime lord who just claimed everything.
Yep. Kerack was ran by the pirate godfather of the witching universe.
Basically, yeah. Wow.
Osmic was followed by one of his 5 sons, Belohun, who ruled over for 20 years, increasing the country's income with the help of his court mage, Lida Nade. He was, however, unable to decide which of his sons should become his successor, which resulted in a plot to replace him with his exiled eldest son, Varaxis. It sounds like the name of a dragon. From Game of Thrones.
That's a dragon name, isn't it?
Yeah. Backed by Risberg and the chapter, the coup d'etat succeeded and Varaxis was crowned.
Dragon Lord.
Yeah, the like the chapter of like sorcerers, that thing. So in return for obtaining the throne, Varaxis had to pay off his debts for the chapter. Apart from raising taxes, he expanded his realm eastwards, thus coming into conflict with the Dryads of Brokilon. His hatred towards Eerie wives grew high, and in order to subjugate them, he plotted with Ervil of Verden and the Order of the White Rose to blitzkrieg the forest.
Oh, I bet that went well.
Oh, yeah. The hatred led him, however, not to victory, but to death. A young dryad, the daughter of Duke Jerkast of Maribor, was present.
Duke Jerkast?
Yeah. It's probably pronounced differently, but
yeah,
I read it how I see it. So
Jerkast. What'd you call me?
Jerkast. It was present when Varaxis' emissaries talked with Foltest about the alliance against the forest and murdered the king a few weeks later when he attended a wedding in Tradagor. Varaxis had a successor, Tarand. Not interested in storming the forest, he focused on different affairs, but the conflict with the Dryads did not cease. By the time the Second Northern War started, 4 joint Verden-Kerack voluntary expeditions were led to Brokilon by Maria Baring. All of them ended tragically for the Dryad scalpers because their guide was in fact the Dryad agent Milva, purposefully luring them into ambushes.
Yeah, great idea, guys. Good idea. Invade the forest. Good work.
Yeah. So it's basically a lot of conflict with the Dryads, and it got taken over and it just started to fall apart. Essentially, you just see that common trend. And then Geralt. Some believe that Geralt's at fault here for the final nail in the coffin. This part is technically game canon content only. But during the Third Northern War, Kerack sent most of its garrison to aid Nordling forces on the front lines. However, this left their defenses weakened and prone to raids by clans of Skellige. Around this time, the kingdom was also decimated by the Catriona Plague, which sowed the seeds of its ultimate downfall. Those of you familiar with The Witcher 3, Catriona Plague was essentially a result of like Geralt's releasing that plague maiden from the tower. So
it's his fault.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that believe it's his fault.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's fun. I mean, everything in some ways Geralt's fault, right?
Yeah, Geralt does tend to mess things up a lot.
He gets around, and he's got his White Knight agenda going on.
Yeah. By the 16th century, the kingdom had been long gone, dwindled due to a combination of its inept rulers and the ruling line dying out. Its land was annexed by its neighbors. The capital city, Kerack, became a part of Cidaris.
Speaking of Cidaris.
Yeah, that's our next place.
That's our next place.
So Cidaris, just a monarchy, similar to the rest. It is officially, as of right now, still a kingdom, not formally ruled by anyone else or a vassal or anything, just its own kingdom. Is ruled by the Cidarian dynasty. Capital is Cidaris, of course. And its official currencies are the Thaler crown, although the crown is an informal currency, and the copper.
Which that means that people will accept it in trade, but it's not seen by the government as an official type of currency.
Yeah, but with its like, I guess in the sense of like these cities are, I mean, these nations aren't like too far apart. I imagine that they're probably not actually that big. I'd have to look at the map and see what the scale was on it, but it's probably a pretty small continent, I would guess. At least that's my impression. But and of course, it's, you know, it's a port. They have like port access, which would just easily take them able to, you know, go along to another port like Novigrad.
Most of the kingdom is a peninsula. So it's mostly surrounded by water.
Yep. Cidaris is a small kingdom on the western shore of the continent and is ruled by King Ethane. The river Adalat in the south forms a natural border between Cidaris, Brugge, and Kerack. East of the kingdom lies Temeria. West lies Brugge, which Brugge on the map is so tiny.
It's like it's almost like just a city.
Like a city.
Yeah, it's very small.
The vivid country owes its position and prosperity to maritime trade, the shipbuilding industry, vine plantations, and the rational use of the riches of the ocean.
I like the riches of the ocean.
Well, they do too. It does pretty well for them. Its coat of arms, and this is actually a specific description, and I don't do heraldic stuff, so I apologize if we're going to interpret this, but
let's go for it.
It is a little weird. So per pale argent and azure, 2 sturgeons counterchanged. So I believe, well, azure's like blue, obviously. I don't know what the argent is. I think it's a different color, essentially.
Argent.
And I believe from the picture that I peeped, it was like, it's just basically 2 sturgeons are birds, right? Sturgeon a bird?
Yeah, that sounds right. That sounds right. I'm looking up argent, and it's used a lot. The metal silver? Oh, argent is an archaic word meaning silver. So it is a color. It's like the color silver and blue. Silver and blue, basically.
Yeah, it's sturgeon is a fish. My bad. It's a fish. Makes sense. Basically, it's 2 fish, and they're like kind of facing away from each other.
Okay, that makes sense for it being you know, surrounded by water.
Yeah. Members of the royal family, however, bear different arms: aquamarine, 2 escallops argent, below a fossilized Cidaris sea urchin proper.
Wow.
So
lots of sea stuff.
Yeah, basically, aquamarine background, I believe, 2 silver scallops.
Escallops.
Or like scallop shells.
Maybe. What is escallops?
At the top, and then...
Escallop.
This sea urchin.
Variant spelling of escalope, another term for scallop.
Okay.
So, yeah. It's just it sounds fancier when you say it like that.
Was the thing. So I think it was like 2 scallop shells up top and then like a sea urchin at the bottom or something. So
okay, yeah, we don't have actual art for these to show you because it's just described.
So probably find it, or there's, I think this one specifically, there was a few. There wasn't like, there was art, but none of them were official.
Right. It's stuff that other people have made, but not like, like you haven't seen it on like the cover of a book, or in some cases in one of the games where you can actually pull it from there. Yeah.
The similar here to Brugge and I already forgot Verden. The cheap Nilfgaardian goods also plagued Cidaris. I chose plagued very specifically as the word there. But so they had a similar problem. King Foltest, of course, not closing down for the Merchants Guild. You know, and it caused problems for the official currency. And then in 1267, Ethane sent his fleet to defend the eastern coast should the Nilfgaardians march past the Yaruga along the coast. So they were kind of forming a bit of the Northern Kingdom Navy or naval force for you know, the Northern Kingdom.
Well, it makes sense. It's in a prime location to be able to send out ships in order to try to counter anything the Nilfgaardians were doing along the coast. So.
And if they wanted to go up that side, and of course, it makes sense that they would want to, because they have the least opposition going up that direction. So,
yeah, this is cool stuff. it's interesting that these are all little individual locations because they're also small. If you were to combine all of these that we discussed today, you'd end up
they're
with...
not even, I mean, they're the size of Cintra.
Right. You'd end up with a place maybe the size of Cintra, but that combined strength might help them fend off invaders or, be able to negotiate with Temeria and not have to be, a vassal state or whatever, like some of them are. Yeah, it's interesting, but I mean, that's just how this stuff works. It's true to, like we discussed, it's true to history. It clearly looks like it would make more sense if they all combined their forces, but that's not how cultures work.
Yeah, they're too busy being like selfish with their own minuscule resources. I mean, they all work together, but of course you see so many conflicts between different nations, like even during, I mean, we see that how much conflict there is, Kaidwin and Aedern, and then with Kaidwin and Redania. I mean, all these places
much larger nations or kingdoms or whatever.
Yep.
Okay. Well, next week we've got our monster dating show, so you are welcome to join us. We would love to have you join us. And if you are currently a patron, a tier 4 or higher patron, then we hope you can join us because it's going to be a hoot. It's going to be a good old crazy time. Like these are so much of the time. Anything else going on, Toasty?
Of course, I do the Cyberpunk Lorecast with Genesis. If you're into Cyberpunk and that, universe and that lore. And I also do the Cyberpunk Red live play podcast, Cyberpunk ''D with the Fumbling 4 and Almighty Crit King. And I'd also just like to kind of shout out I just thought it was a really interesting question that was posed in the Witcher channel on the Discord the other day when we were talking about the nature of how magic affects the world or the people's beliefs affect on magic, because of course something magic in the Witcher universe is supposed to be kind of nebulous and
right.
It's chaos. Let
me read it so to kind of clue people into the conversation that was happening. This is from Svala, who's one of our members on the Discord. And Svala wrote, "Hi, I just found the Witcher Lorecast. I'm up to episode 15, first bestiary episode. I have scattered Witcher knowledge, and this may have been covered, but how did undead end up in the world? Monsters came from the conjunction, but undead, zombies, wraiths, etc., is a little unclear. Is it just lingering chaos magic that continues to reanimate people? Some come out well after the conjunction. Did they exist before the conjunction?" And my assumption, I responded and I said, my assumption is that it's tied to magic, and that came with the conjunction. The magical forces in order to reanimate the dead didn't exist in the world until the conjunction happened. And whether those things naturally started, just running amok and reanimating dead bodies, or who knows, there were rogue wizards out there playing with the new magical things that they could tap into. And then, sure enough, you've got curses happening and people not being able to die completely and these kinds of things coming. And it may be a combination of both those things. That was my assumption. So it got into this really interesting conversation about it's not clearly stated. It's not like this is something that is actually spelled out anywhere. So it's a really good question.
Yeah. So I just thought it was really interesting. One of the I think one of the cooler questions is coming in for me, because I was just see, whenever I have a question where I'm kind of I don't know, and I do I usually, if I see something like that, I'll immediately go look it up regardless of where I'm at. I'm usually at work. I just pull out my phone. I'm like, but yeah, no, it was an interesting idea because people's beliefs do obviously play a thing, and we know superstition is a big deal. I mean, there's a lot of superstitious people in the real world, and or believing in these certain things to lead to these certain situations and stuff, or having an explanation for monsters, because it's easier to call something a monster than not. But
look at any of our bestiary episodes with the real world explanations for the myth behind stuff.
But it's it's weird, because in a world with established magic, why would those superstitions exist if there wasn't a reason for it?
Well, I think in both cases people don't either have the ability or take the time to actually scientifically vet things. And so they just go on whatever their gut says or whatever the situation looks like, which isn't always the true reason for a thing, right? And Geralt comes across this all the time, where people are like, hey, there's this thing going on, and he looks into it and he goes, well, actually it's this, right? Yeah. But we jump to conclusions.
So often that it comes in, it's like maybe like, or there's quests where like people like, it seems like it's an easy explanation, but then it ends up actually being like something that's worthwhile, or like Geralt needs to actually take care of. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's just the nature of people. We all like to jump to conclusions. We all like to make sure that the world around us is explainable, even if it's scary. To have a scary explanation is better than no explanation, right? We're seeking to control the environment around us through our understanding of it in our minds, which means that we often gravitate towards false information. And it's just the nature of being ignorant too. Like the less you know, the less you have to build a rational explanation that actually makes any sense. Yeah. So it's good conversation. Thank you for sharing that on there. And we'd love to continue talking with you guys about some of this stuff. So if you aren't on our Discord yet, come join us, Robots Radio Discord. You can just search it. You can go to robotsradio.net. There's a link there. Also robotsradio.net for all of my podcasts and all the other shows on the network. Lots of different shows, lots of awesome hosts with some really cool content out there. So if you're looking for more things to listen to, head on over there, poke around. I'm sure you'll find something that you like. And that's going to do it for this week. But sorry, the episode's a little late this week. We had to delay things a few days, but we'll be back normal time next week on Monday, and looking forward to chatting with our patrons. So we'll see you guys then. And chat, thanks for being here as well. See you guys next time. Bye, everybody. Oh, Toasty, do your thing.
I was about to wait. I was like,
do your thing. I messed up.
Stay safe on the path.
Bye. Thanks for tuning into the Witcher Lorecast. We'd love to hear about your experiences with the games and the books and the TV series and all your thoughts on everything. Please check out the Robots Radio Discord and follow us on Twitter at Witcher Lorecast.
You've been listening to a Robots Radio podcast. Smart shows for interesting people. Check out all the shows at robotsradio.net.